exciting to be here. It's actually somewhat nerve-wracking because there are a lot of people in this room that know a lot more about product design than I do. So I'll share some of my observations here. And as Richard mentioned, I've been in the venture industry for quite some time. And in the early days, started the firm back about 15 years ago with a couple other people. It was a time when there were a lot of cameras, and digital cameras were really coming in to use. How many people in this room have owned a digital camera, a standalone digital camera? Pretty much everybody in this room. How many people in this room, as a little bit of a foreshadowing here, have used a digital camera in the last week? Yeah, a much smaller number. So anyways, a bit of a foreshadowing there. So one of the first companies that we backed and that I backed after founding Shasta about 15 years ago, 14, 15 years ago, is a company called iFi. And iFi had this very, very clever idea, which is to take a memory card and in the memory card put an antenna, put logic, and actually run a lightweight networking stack. And what that would allow you to do is to turn any digital camera that accepted an SD card into a wireless internet connected device. And this is back before people had talked about the IoT, before people had talked about actually getting photos out of a device wirelessly to the internet and where you wanted it to go. So it was a very, very clever product. It would fit in there. And it had some challenges along the way. You can see the timeline for iFi here. We backed it in 2007, Series A, very early team that had great technical background, 4 Israeli founders. And it was based on an Atheros chip that allowed them to do all the magic inside of the card. So they shipped the first product in 2007. And around the same time, this product called the iPhone launched. And a lot of people, including Microsoft and others, thought, hey, there's no way it could be successful. Who's going to pay for it? And the company made steady progress and raised a large amount of money. We were able to raise about $40 million based on enthusiasm for the product and what they were building, and the promise of being able to get pictures wirelessly out to the internet and where you want it to go. We hit $15 million in revenue, and then at the same time, Apple was quietly building along and was shipping in the order of about 150 million iPhones. And I mentioned the iPhone 4 because the iPhone 4 was the first phone that had a great camera. It really changed things. It was really a watershed moment there. And then 2014, iFi came along and launched their photo sharing service. And then 2016, 2 years later, they just had a steady decline in their sales, and the company went out of business. And it was really unfortunate. Great technology, but went out of business. In contrast, Nest, and I think everybody here is familiar with the Nest thermostat. It was a beautiful product. You put it on the wall. It was more expensive. It was $250 versus $100 to $150 for an iFi card. Similar reviews in a lot of ways. People loved the product. They loved the idea of putting it in their home. iFi had a lot of great reviews. If you go back and you search iFi, you'll read Wired articles and others about how great the product is, how transformational it could be. And if you look at the timeline with Nest, you'll see that things moved very quickly with Nest. They founded the company. We invested roughly the same amount of money. The launch was delayed. They had to delay the product by about 6 months to get to market. So there was a point there, and I remember Naomi was talking about how they had to do some delays with the product. They did some of the right things. They had the first customer shipment. They did raise a lot more money. They raised $163 million across 2 rounds. But then they hit $70 million in revenue in the first year, full year of shipments. They launched their next product, and then they were acquired by Google. So the question becomes, what was the difference between these products? Why was Nest successful when iFi wasn't? And when we look at this, I think everybody in this room is familiar with the challenges that we have on this slide. You have design and manufacturing, marketing, and the channels. These were problems that were faced by both companies. Nest had them, achieved success here. iFi faced these same challenges. And when you look at the size of an iFi card, even though it looks and sounds very simple, it was very difficult to be able to manufacture this product. What's the packaging that you would use? How would you build it in volume? What are all the things that would happen, the rework and all the problems you'd have? And then marketing. Marketing was similarly challenging for both of these products. I say wireless memory card now, but it took about 9 months for the company in working with marketers, PR specialists, the product team, thinking about the customer. What would be a name that would be easy to remember, to spell? How do you explain it? And then you say wireless memory card. And in the same way with Nest, they called it the learning thermostat, and I'll get back to that in a minute. So both of them had simple names. And then the final item that we had on the slide, if you could bring it back up, is channels. They both had channel challenges that they had to go to. How do you go to market? How do you build consumer awareness? What kind of margins do you have? And as I think anybody that works with physical products know, you always have margin pressure. You always wish you had more. You wish you could charge less for it, but you need it because you have to keep the channel happy. So here's the question. Did the iPhone 4 kill iFi? And when you look at that history that we had, it was pretty clear, pretty big trend that they were facing. They got to 15 million in revenue. I would say that no, the iPhone did not kill iFi. It was a different set of decisions that they made, as an investor was complicit in, to be perfectly candid. And yeah, you are. You know, you're on the board. You're on this board for 10 years. You want the company to work out. So what really happened with this is iFi failed to deliver sufficient value to consumers. And there were a variety of reasons for it, but there were some very, very fundamental things here, very similar to what Willow was talking about, which is it all starts with deep consumer and ecosystem understanding, really understanding that. What are those unmet needs that you have? They were completely focused on, okay, nobody gets photos out of their camera. They're stuck in the card. The card ends up having gigabytes, or at the time, I guess, megabytes of photos that are there that you know there was a great photo from the bar mitzvah you went to, but you didn't get it out. So they were so focused on the technology beauty of what they were doing, adding a networking stack, being able to do this, that they didn't really focus on the real problem. The real problem that people had was, how do I take those photos and kind of that full stack solution of sharing them with people and then filing them and doing all these things? And they failed. Could you bring the slide up again? So they didn't focus on the software up front. They didn't do the work that they really needed to do. And what that boils down to, and I think for anybody that's a hardware or ID focused person, they didn't hire the software resources that they needed. They didn't build it into the product offering. They didn't think about these things, so it became complex to actually configure the camera. And they were more focused on, how do we work with Canon? How do we work with the different camera vendors so that maybe we can integrate the software and make it easier to configure? And they delivered insufficient value. Actually spending $150 to get photos off a camera was a great parlor trick. But the dream and the thing that we invested in when we did it was we viewed it as a key and a go-to-market vehicle to be able to deliver the software and the relationship with the consumer and the subscription business that could come to it. And what we missed, and what I missed as a board member, is they just didn't hire the right people at the right time and put the resources against it to be able to build this. Now, let's contrast Nest. And it's a really interesting coincidence because it looks a lot like HAL 9000. You can see it right here. It's really interesting. Even the colors are remarkably similar. It has a speaker, but the speaker doesn't talk to you in the Nest thermostat and say, I'm sorry, we can't do that. But a lot of people would think about Nest and they think about the Honeywell Round. How many people in this room remember the Honeywell Round? It was that old thermostat. That was absolutely the inspiration for Nest. But HAL was the magic. This is what it was all about. And one of the stories of Nest that's really not told is they hired AI talent, and Yoki Matsuoka, who is one of the leading experts in the world in machine learning, applied AI. It's one of the first broad consumer products where AI was in it from the ground up. A lot of people don't realize this. So the reason you could get this to work and you could turn it into the Nest learning thermostat is because they would tell people, hey, when you're cold, turn it up. When you're hot, turn it down. And then the algorithms in the cloud would get better and better. and then it would build a program. It was actually delivering the value. It was putting these pieces together, delivering the promise of the product is what it was about. So when you look at the chain here of what happened, they started with, I mean, obviously the early software focus, and they leveraged the AI, but the foundation that they had, that they worked upon, was a very, very deep customer understanding. And the ways in which they did that, not just customer and competitors, is before they did a single piece of design work, they went out and they visited hundreds of homes. They took photos in all these homes. They looked at what people were doing. They found that sometimes the thermostat was actually in a closet. A lot of times it was by the door. And they looked at how people used it, and they asked people, how often do you program it? Do you really program it? What do you like? What don't you like? So that's one thing they did. They also went and did a lot of competitive research. And what they did is they bought literally hundreds of thermostats. And they would go every store that you could buy a thermostat. They would go to Home Depot, and you'd see what a mess that was to go to that. Or you go to a local hardware store, you'd buy it on the internet. They built a wall in their offices in this garage in Palo Alto off Alma Street, not too far away. And they would open the boxes, see what the packaging was like, see how hard some of the packaging was, frustration-free packaging, which is not. And they would go ahead and they'd install it in the drywall. And they would see what it was like, and what was the mounting hardware, and what are all these pieces that they had, and how this worked. And they developed this feeling. And then the third thing they did was they played around with all of the component technologies, all the sensors that were available, all the displays, the materials, everything you could have. When you went into the garage and they'd open up the doors, you go in and it was like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but it was with sensors. And they would have 20 or 30 different potential thermistors that they would use in it, or displays that they would use, because they were thinking about, well, how might we be able to build a round display, or how might we be able to create a tactile sensation through audio? Because when you turn it, they were thinking about, will I get that tick, 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 tick when I do it? And they worked on all the different tones and things that they would do. And in this garage, where squirrels would run in occasionally, they figured all this out, and then they started to do the design work to figure out how to put it together. And part of that core team, they had people that were experts in these different areas. They did that work. Then they came up with the design, and software was integral to it, because Yoki was one of the first 10 members of the team. So this is absolutely critical. It's this type of stuff that you never hear about, but I absolutely echo what Willow was talking about before this, where you have to really understand your customers' unmet needs. So when you advance to the next slide here, I'd like to talk about how have we applied what we've learned at Shasta in how we work with companies, how we think about things. And the product that you see here is this device on the wall. This is tonal. And what it is effectively, these are my words, not the marketing words. Think Peloton. How many people are familiar with Peloton, the spin bike? Yeah, everybody. Not as many people as digital cameras, but it's basically Peloton for strength training. So if you think about all those weights and dumbbells, or you work with a trainer, it replaces that with a device that you're able to put on the wall. And could you keep the slides up? What it is it's a 24-inch capacitive touch display. It's basically a huge iPad, is a way to think about it. And inside of there's an e-bike motor. And that e-bike motor delivers electromagnetic resistance. And what it allows you to do is to basically emulate a weight stack with software. And you have the e-bike motor, and then you coil a couple of cables around it, and then they come out to these arms that can articulate in different directions. And I can create a weight stack with software that's anywhere from 0 to 200 pounds. So similar to Nest, these guys started out and they played around with the component technologies. And Ali Arati, the founder and CEO of the company, he spent a year with those technologies on a bench figuring out, how do I write the code to be able to emulate a weight stack? That was the initial piece that he did in building this company. Now, we talked to the company really early on. Mayfield introduced us to the company. They seeded it together with Bolt. and met with the company and loved what they were doing. We could see where they could go with what they were doing. Ollie wanted to bring the product to market as fast as possible. You know, it's this idea of fail fast, learn, iterate, et cetera. And our view in talking with Ollie was, actually, you have this amazing foundation and insight. You should actually chill out and take some time, get to know your customers better, work on the software, work on the content, and build a kick-ass product. That's what you should do. And it's all these pieces. And yeah, software is going to be important. There's kind of a theme here, right? You know, I think this room is full of a lot of people that are hardware focused. Software matters. The hardware will sing with the right software. So we ended up spending about 15 more months than Ollie had planned to spend. And it was part of our coming in as agreeing that that was the direction that he'd want to go, and we talked a lot about why that mattered. They did exhaustive customer work. And one of the things they found, and I was talking to a friend of mine, DJ, who's over here, was talking about how women love tonal. One of the things we found is women aren't that crazy about going to gyms. They want to become stronger. They want to become toned. They want to work with a trainer, but a trainer is expensive. You don't want to be in a smelly gym. You don't want to be with a bunch of guys kind of watching you while you're trying to figure out how to use the equipment. So we started to think about, how do we build a device that can appeal to the segments that we want to appeal to? So what did we end up doing? How were these lessons applied? We started with the deep customer research, and then we figured out, what is that full stack solution so somebody could buy tonal and get stronger or get into better shape? And this led to a very strong early focus on software and how do you build a device that would be able to deliver the content, that would deliver a magic experience. And then the other thing, for people that haven't seen the product yet, AI is a critical part of what they're doing. So in building the full stack, it's not just, hey, how do I build this machine that works like a stack of weights or dumbbells and connect in all the stuff that you do with the trainer? So what they did in parallel at the same time over a 15-month period is they worked on the content creation pipeline. They hired Ryan Vance, who runs content. He built a company called Fitstar that delivered personal trainer content on your iPhone or your iPad. He had been a longtime producer and said, hey, we have this machine. What could you do if instead of just delivering videos, you could actually deliver a series of videos stitched together by an AI that would be tightly integrated with a machine that would make you feel like you're working interactively with a personal trainer? So the company spent about 15 months to put all these pieces together. They went out, they had 30 machines out in the field where they would have increasing levels of software and coaches that they have on this to deliver this AI experience. And what we found as we started to do that is the better that it got, the engagement levels were high. The net promoter score went up. People loved having it in their home. And we were able to really polish the product and think about, how do we create this magical experience for the product with a high net promoter score, a strong word of mouth. And it is a $3,000 device, so you have to deliver a huge amount of value. So looking forward, we had a great launch, a very well-received launch. For anybody that is not familiar with the product, later today, after we're done, you could go down to Union Street, near Union and Laguna. There is a showroom open. You can see for yourself what tonal is all about. Going forward, what we're very focused on is, how do we continue to create great content? So because it's a connected device, we can push it out, we can do that. Then there's market and channel execution. It's an expensive product, so you have to figure out how to sell it to people. It's a considered purchase. It's $50 a month, but Peloton has paved the way on a lot of this. And then finally, our North Star here is, how do we deliver the value in the whole product, the complete product, to do this? So coming back around to starting with iFi, looking at Nest, and thinking about designing great products, and specifically products, and I think for people in this room are interested in hardware-related products, what is the difference between success and failure? And I think a lot of people talk about the things that are on the left. There's design and manufacturing execution. Very hard. There are some people like Andre, who's over here, who are exceptionally good at understanding this. And you have product marketing in new categories. How do you explain something new that hasn't existed before? Those are some of the most exciting products. And then building these go-to-market channels. How do you get people to become aware of it? I'd argue that that's only table stakes. That's just enough to be able to get onto the field of play and be able to take a company like this to market. What really matters is delivering high value, value that people have. And the foundation for this is to deeply, deeply, deeply understand your customers, because often their number one reason they give you for what they're looking for is not really their hidden unmet need. It might be number 2, number 3, number 4. Uncovering that, meeting those needs, putting those together, focus on software early to be able to put together this great experience for your users, and then finally deliver this complete solution so that when people do make that decision to buy your product, and they do that and they bring it into their lives, they're going to rave about it to everybody else. So thank you very much. I hope that's helpful.